Okay, I think it's good evening, everybody. It is just 7 o'clock now, and welcome to the July 17th, 2023 meeting of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. This is Diane Cece. We have Charles D. Bisegli co-piloting tonight, so he'll be letting people in the room and watching for chat comments as well for a little while. I'll walk through the agenda, which will actually talk about a couple of items while we're on the agenda. And then for the purposes of tonight, we just really want to open up the meeting again to talking primarily about the zoning regulations rewrite. See if we can answer any questions, but also to advise people on how they can still participate. And we're going to encourage people to, if you haven't already started, to start writing into Steve Kleppen and the commission with questions, comments, and suggestions so that they're on the record and that they're getting answered publicly as well, which is a big help for everyone. Okay, so one announcement that we have, anything else that's important will be posted in the email newsletter, for which you have to be on our email list to receive. On the 25th, which is a week from tomorrow, the DOT's Walkbridge project team will be hosting a virtual public information session regarding the rehabilitation, which actually looks like a pretty big overhaul of the Strawberry Hill Avenue Metro North Railroad Bridge, which is down at the bottom of Strawberry Hill. As you know, they're just finished up or about to finish up the highway overpass bridge. It starts at 6 p.m. It's a public information forum. It's not a public hearing. What they'll look to do is give everyone an overview of what the project is. They'll talk about the community impacts in terms of the work that they'll be doing on the bridge. They'll go over, I believe they'll be prepared to talk about detours. And the link that I just brought up here was actually provided also in last week's email. I think it was in the Wednesday email. So you can open that up, or you can always go to walkbridgect.com and you'll find all the links to all the construction activities. They give you a little bit of background here. And then at the meeting, the public forum, they'll present everything and they will go over the highlights of the project for what they'll be working on. And also the start of the project, the duration, and some information about how the construction is going to proceed. Ultimately, they'll have a project fact sheet that will be available for the public, and they will post the video of the information session on the DOT's website. They generally do that within a week of the meeting, and as soon as we see that get posted, we will forward that as well. For current business, and what we want to focus on tonight is a continued discussion on the zoning regulations, which is an update for the entire city, and but in particular, the many changes that will be happening in East Norwalk. Under new business, we've tabled to tonight, and we'll table again, presumably, to talk about ad hoc committee formations for ENNA with groups of volunteers to be able to provide some support for our now very limited board in terms of being able to help out doing the heavy lifting with all of this. And then we're just going to go ahead and open this up for discussion. Okay, so as a reminder, on the city's website, you can go to planning and zoning, and then in their menu, you're going to drop down to zoning regulations. And on that page, you'll see all of the documents that you could need regarding the zoning regulations update. One of the most important tools that you can use there is the interactive map that allows you to click on neighborhoods and parcels throughout the city. It doesn't have all the information about the changes, but it does give you the baseline changes of what the zone is currently zoned for in terms of housing and uses, and what it will be zoned for should this be approved in the fall. So we are still encouraging people to go on to the city website and use this, but also there's a host of other tools on there that you can use. One of the tools is the ability to click on a graphic that's a little icon that's there, where you can send your comments, questions, suggestions, and concerns directly into city staff. They are answering those, and they are posting those online, so that you can go through and you can read what everyone has already submitted. And they will also answer directly if you have a specific question as well. So this is the actual website, and the city website. It's under zoning regulation updates in their menu, and you can get there through either their menu bar on their page or always down the left-hand side of all of their pages. And then everything you need to know about the zoning regulation updates is within this page. You'll want to read through it. Open up the information sheets for the topics that interest you. At this point, it's already July, and we know that they're going to be looking to hold one public hearing. It looks like it'll be September, and then move very quickly to be able to get this zoning regulations approved. So if you have questions on your own parcel and what's going to change for your property or the street or the neighborhood, or questions about any changes throughout the city, the sooner you get them into City Hall to staff, the sooner you can get an answer, and the sooner they'll post everything so that we can also see it as well. When I went in today to take a look at it, the questions and answer page is now 62 pages long. So it's pretty robust in terms of, you know, what the communication is from the community. But I can tell you that I didn't see a whole lot of communication coming in from East Norwalkers. So if you are concerned about what's going to happen in particular, both in 06855 and also right in the abutting neighborhoods in 06851, I really would encourage you to start writing in so that everything is on the record, and more importantly, to make sure that you're getting your specific answers, questions answered by staff. As a reminder, in addition to using that link that's on the city website, you still can write in directly, of course, to the P&Z Commission, and all of the communication will ultimately be given to them. But you can write to the commission in care of Principal Planner Brian Baker and simply copy P&Z Director Steve Kleppen on it. And they'll be compiling those and providing all those comments and communications to the Zoning Commission. They'll be taking all of your comments into account as they continue to review these plans and discuss them with staff and deliberate what they'd like to see changed. According to Steve Kleppen, as they're going through this process, they are taking recommendations back from the commission on things that they think should be modified. So at this point, it's not written in stone, but it's important for you to know that the bulk of the changes that have been made really have been made outside of East Norwalk. So they're still continuing to pull back on the two-family zoning, but they haven't really done that except in a very small area of East Norwalk up by Strawberry Hill. And the rest of the comments coming in for Ludlow Manor, the East Avenue peripheral area, all they're saying is that they're continuing to look at things, but that they're committed to having higher density where there's transit and transit hubs and the infrastructure to support it. The way that that's worded would personally lead me to believe that they still don't have any intention of modifying the rest of the East Norwalk parcels that we're asking to be retained. In addition to writing into the commission and city staff, we do urge you to copy or write in separately to both the mayor and the district city council reps. Mr. Kites and Ms. McMurray, so that they can hear from their constituents on what your concerns are and continue to either start or continue to provide that feedback to the commission. While no elected official is voting on these changes, only the appointed commission, there's nothing that prevents the elected officials from expressing their concerns or suggestions or speaking on your behalf as their constituents. Okay, and just wanted to take a quick opportunity to remind folks that in addition to the communications into City Hall, attending public hearings, etc., there are 2 other initiatives going on just in terms of building awareness and communicating with the city. The first one is the petition that's under the Facebook group called Save Norwalk Neighborhoods. And ENNA has been publishing this widely and in our emails. For the petition itself, as of tonight, we're getting very close to 800 signatures. But in a city of nearly 90,000 folks, that kind of falls short of the bar of what we really need to influence the city to consider what people are asking for. We're at least pushing for 2,000 signatures between now and the end of summer, when this would be presented to both staff and the commission. And it's a pretty, the reason why we have that number may come as no surprise to many of you, but it is related to the director's comment that he wouldn't feel compelled to change his recommendations, even if 2,000 of us objected to it. And I think it's an important symbol and gesture then for the Norwalk community at large, not just East Norwalk, to at least try to push to get 2,000 people to sign this. So if you've already signed it, thanks very much. If you haven't signed it, we encourage you to go to the petition and read it and then sign it, and also share it with your neighbors and friends. You, as a reminder, we're going to have to spend some time working with the Save Norwalk Neighborhoods folks. We'll have a small team together that will be actually vetting these signatures so that they're legitimate Norwalkers. In order to sign it, you either have to live in Norwalk or you have to be a property owner of record in Norwalk. And then the other communications that we still have, and it's we still see a lot of these around town. We want people to keep them up. The signage that we have, just to build awareness that we're looking to preserve the zoning for the most part in Norwalk. And ENNA just was able to get a bunch more signs. I know that last time we communicated, we said we only had a few left because of people not coming by to pick them up, but we have a bunch more. So if you are interested in posting a sign either in your lawn or in a business window, please contact us. You can just email us at info@eastnorwalk.org, and we will give you the pickup instructions for them. And we also have volunteers that are willing to go out and deliver them. Another thing that we'd like to encourage you to do, just for visibility and to keep this top of mind during the summer, is if you're out and about in any of the public events or public concerts, you may want to consider bringing your lawn sign or an extra one with you and kind of propping it up by your lawn chair. And so we build more awareness within the community of what's going on with the project. And if you do decide that you want to prop this up in your either rear window or dashboard window, just make sure that you're doing that when you're not driving. We want to make sure people are safe. And in the rear view window, we want to make sure that it's an unobstructed view so no one gets any tickets there. So just email us if you want to get any signs. And the email to the link to the email petition is posted all over social media, and it's been posted in our last 3 email newsletters. Okay, so you can just pencil this in, but of course we'll email it out. Our next official meeting is always, of course, the 3rd Monday of the month. So that is August 21st at 7 p.m. this could quite possibly be our last formal meeting prior to the last of the public hearings on the zoning regulations. So we know people are getting kids back to college, school is starting, folks are still on vacation. But if there's any way to hold this date open so that you can join this meeting, it would be great. And then also, finally now, I'll be looking to do some board and volunteer interviews during August, especially because our annual board meeting by bylaw regulations is in September. And I'll be looking to do those via Zoom and phone. So for those of you who did reach out with an interest in providing more volunteer services and also the possibility of serving on our board, first of all, thank you very much. And second of all, we know you've been waiting, and watch your emails. So we'll get that going in August. And then for board members, it's just a quick nomination process, and hope to bring folks onto the board at our September annual meeting, at our September annual board meeting. Okay, and then as always, for more information or questions, comments, anything you need help with, the best way to get a hold of us is through email. Our website, you can get more information, but that's not always up to date because it takes a lot of work to get everything posted there. But you can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And for important meetings and initiatives that we have, we do post on nextdoor.com. And then finally, for communication with us, email us. And we always try to get back to you either later at night or on the weekend. info@eastnorwalk.org. If you have, Charles, if you want to go through chat first and let me know if there's anything there or if people.
Okay, the only thing Lisa did mention, can you give an update on the charter revisions?
Okay, and thanks, Lisa. Unfortunately, this is one of these times where there's just not enough nights in the week. So there's actually a conflict with us tonight with the Common Council special meeting of their further public review of the charter revision and public comment. But people could still, be emailing in. At this point, I don't know if their agenda actually had public comment, discussion, and then a vote for tonight, or if they were continuing their discussion. It may have had a vote for tonight, which means that they would approve the charter revision recommendations coming out of the commission, and then it would move on then, I believe, to the town clerk to start formulating what the actual ballot questions will be come the November ballot. I understand now that they have two documents that are posted online. One is kind of a cheat sheet. It's not very long, and I think they've now compiled in very user English, easy to understand layman's terms, the recommendations that they're making for the charter. So you can go in and read those. And then I think they have a lengthier document where you can go in and you can go chapter by chapter and see what the recommendations are. For the controversial items, I know one that's been top of mind for everyone was the request coming from somewhere that to put back in this charter revision, the request for a 4-year mayoral term. So that's been a very hot topic. One change I know that they did make was the timing. Should it be approved by the voters to go to a 4-year term on the mayor, the timing they've moved to be effective, instead of being effective in 2025, they agreed to make it effective in 2027, if it passes at all. There's still a lot of staunch opposition in the community for a variety of reasons to move to that. And if they don't break that question out separately, people have been asking me what those questions are going to look like. And honestly, I don't know. I know in the last go around of charter revision, when it was limited to specific items, that they ended up with 4 specific questions individually that voters can vote on. I'm not clear yet, and I haven't read the last minutes, if they intend to have a straight up or down vote on every change. And that would presumably read something like, should the charter of the city of Norwalk be modified as per the recommendations approved by the Common Council? And it would just be yes or no. If it's yes, that means every recommendation in there is approved and would be implemented. And if it's no, it means nothing survives. If anyone else knows yet where they're leading with, where they're heading toward with the questions, you can also chime in. What they may do is they may break out a couple of questions. For example, the question of the 4-year term. They may take that and another couple of questions separately and get yes or no specifically on those, and then have a catch-all question that says, should the balance of the recommended changes of the City of Norwalk Charter be implemented as approved by the commission? Has anyone read the last minutes or have any more of an update than that on Mayor Knopp? I think you're unmuted.
Yeah, thank you. I've made a couple of comments at public hearings, and so people know, even though I'm a former mayor, I oppose a 4-year term for the mayor. And when I was mayor, I had a 15-0 majority on the city council, and even then, I didn't try to do a charter revision on the term of the mayor. I'm not going to give a lengthy explanation why. I value local democracy too much. But because we're here talking about zoning, it seems to me that there's a balance question here, which is, as long as we have an appointed zoning commission that has 4-year terms, one way to express disappointment or approval, depending on your point of view, with zoning decisions made by the commission is to vote for or against the mayor who appointed the zoning commissioners. Now, they also have to be approved by the Common Council, so there's a second level of accountability there. But I would hope that we don't end up in a situation in which we have 4-year zoning commissioners able to be insulated from the reasonable points of view of the public. I don't mean in an extreme public comment way, or not in my backyard, opposed to everything, but there's a reasonable discussion. And I think that the public deserves the opportunity to express an opinion about the appointment of the zoning commissioners every 2 years by voting in the mayoral election. So there are 3 or 4 other reasons why I don't think we should have a 4-year mayoral term. I don't think we need it to get projects done. It won't reduce fundraising. They'll just raise money for 4 years rather than 2 years. But mainly, I think that local democracy is so meaningful that we don't want to dilute it, and we're losing the opportunity to participate in a meaningful democracy at many different levels in the state and in the country. But just so this group knows, I think there is an important link between opposing the 4-year term and holding zoning commissioners accountable to make sure that there's a willingness to listen to public concern. We don't have to agree with zoning commissioners and everything. They're independent appointees, and I respect many of them have a valid point of view, even when I disagree with them. But I don't think insulating them from hearing about from the public, not just at zoning project hearings or an applicant's hearings, but through the election of the mayor who appointed them, would be something we don't want to give up.
Great, thank you for that. So then, are you essentially then supporting an elected P&Z commission, or are you talking about simply the terms of the commissioners?
Now, I'm talking about the term of the mayor who appoints them.
Right.
I mean, I think there's a need with zoning commissioners to, become well informed about the complicated regulations. The reason I don't favor an elected planning and zoning commission is that it has important judicial functions. So planning and zoning commissions have 2 functions. One is a legislative function, which is to adopt a city master plan, to adopt zoning regulations about POD and other such things. That's a legislative function, writing regulations. But the other function is a judicial function, which is deciding whether or not an applicant's application qualifies under the regulations. I mean, one of the concerns I had about the Cemetery Road situation was that the regulations were written with so much discretion that so many of these so-called bonus points, which didn't really relate to anything that benefited the public interest in a real way, that the decision was so subjective and discretionary that it was hard to say that they were implementing the law. But theoretically, zoning commissioners, when they approve or disapprove an application or approve or disapprove it with qualifications, they're acting in a judicial capacity. And that's why, for example, state law says they can only consider what's on the record. And you can't and shouldn't call up a zoning commissioner and say, hey, I've got some background on the application that you didn't hear. Let me tell you. Well, that would disqualify a commissioner if he or she listened to it. So there are quasi-judicial ground rules about how a zoning commission can rule. And I don't think electing judges is a good idea. On the other hand, I don't think insulating the whole process from all public opinion is a good idea either. And I think the 2-year term with the appointed zoning commissioners to me is a good balance. And I don't want to see that balance upset by a 4-year term for the mayor, where there's already a 4-year term for zoning planning commissioners.
Thank you.
But it just, again, I just think how few opportunities in all of our lives we have to participate in a democratic process that is meaningful. And right now, with the federal government in dysfunction, with the state delegating many things to municipalities, with this federal ARPA money coming in, that's changed the whole fiscal relationship between the feds, the states, and cities. I don't think we want to give up important democratic participation at the local level. To me, the mayor is strong enough. And I don't know of any project that's ever died because the mayor only had a 2-year term. I mean, look at Bill Collins in South Norwalk. That support's continued for 20 years. My project on Wall Street had some problems for a while, but that's back on track. It looks like Mayor Esposito's support for the West Avenue project has continued. These things are not in jeopardy after a few years because they have a strong foundation in terms of land use, the city's needs, the city's economy. And I don't know of any good reason why we should shift to a 4-year term just because other cities have done it. I'd rather look how great Norwalk is being regarded now by outside entities as a great place to live. Well, why change it? There's nothing broken here. And there's been no rationale offered by the charter revision commissioners to change it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Thank you, Alex. Does anyone else have some comments or thoughts regarding charter revision or any of the major components that you're familiar with it on terms or eliminating some positions that aren't necessary on the ballot? And I think it's still in there to increase the size of the police commission, which is something we've been lobbying for years. Okay, I'll add something else too, Alex, just so that we can play devil's advocate, is in the past, I've personally gone back and forth on the benefits, the pros and cons of a 4-year term. I kind of like the idea of it because it leaves for anyone to try to be effective. It's hard to do that when you're really being a mayor, working with staff and the council for a year. And then there's a good chunk of the second year then that really you are fundraising and campaigning. I'm not suggesting that anyone is negligent in year 2 in terms of, their duties. But I am saying that I think that puts, that second year is what bothers me in terms of, the useful time, working on behalf of residents and taxpayers versus fundraising and campaigning. My own personal notion was that I support a 4-year term, but not in the absence of term limits. So that's kind of where I went, drawing the line of term limits, and then also modifying possibly staggered terms of the council and some commissions. So I think it's worthy of a lot more debate. And part of my concern, I think I've expressed this at a couple of meetings, is that it just seems to be in there without the rationale for why it's there. And it wasn't asked for by the public. And the public has even on numerous occasions asked for it to be taken out, much less be modified, just pull it out. Again, because part of the fear is that some of the great work that they've done with this charter, especially cleaning it up and the readability and for it to be more fair for people to understand, a lot of that would stand to be the old, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And it would be sad if that happens. So, and we've been down this road before, and we already know the overwhelming rejection of the community several years ago, because the 4-year term, that was a question on the ballot.
Well, just one last comment, which is, whatever we think of the zoning regulations, at least the zoning commission has done a pretty good job of planning for better public participation than we usually have. They've had more hearings. They've had hearings in the community. They've published information online, responses. I don't think the Charter Revision Commission has done nearly enough of that. I mean, last week I spoke at one of their meetings and there were 4 people who spoke.
Yeah.
Which is just not sufficient.
Mhm.
And I think the problem here is that with COVID and Zoom meetings, you have to really make an effort to structure public outreach and the dissemination of information in a way that's very different from the old normal days of in-person hearings. And I don't think that's been done sufficiently. That's why I hope, I've urged them either to take the mayoral question as a separate one, or since it's not going to go into effect if it passes for 2 additional years, why act on it now if it's not such a big necessity? Take it out entirely. I mean, they presented the charter revision as a content neutral cleanup of obsolete provisions. And then to throw the mayoral term into that seems to me a little bit duplicitous. And I don't think that's fair. And I think once the public heard that, okay, it's just a cleanup, some people just kind of tuned out, but that's really not what's been happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank
And
you.
I'll just take an opportunity to say the same thing was done to us on the zoning regulations rewrite. The original scope was to get a consultant in that could clean everything up and reduce the zones and make things easy to understand, and nothing substantive about the real changes in the community. And then all of a sudden, we see all these zone changes coming out at us. I do say that what you're talking about, I think people are always asking for it in the simplest terms we can understand. And, we just ask, what exists today? How are you looking to change it? And why would that be beneficial? And then people like ENNA and other more organized groups also say, what is the projected impact of the change if you do make it? And what are the, kind of the detriments of what could happen in the community if you don't? It's pretty straightforward. We've even told them they could just do it as a grid, which is pretty easy to understand. Left-hand side is, here's what you have today. Here's what the proposed change is. Here's why it would be beneficial. And here's a potential projected, downfall. People, in the simplest terms, everyone, I think everyone who participates in ENNA agrees with this. We want to make informed decisions. That's all we ask. And even when even when ENNA is dealing with formal, government groups, it's not a matter of, necessarily we want to convince you to agree with what we're asking for. If you watch us speak at hearings and things, you'll see that what we're begging is that we just want them to make an informed decision. We want them to be asking all the right questions. And if they do that, if they're getting all the information and asking questions and they reach a different conclusion than we did, that's okay. But if they did that because they weren't asking the questions and considering all the information, then that's not okay. So, I mean, we always hope they agree with us, but again, if they don't, and they considered everything and simply reached a different conclusion, you know, there's always respect for that. I think Lisa Rogers' hand is up, but it may be David. Or Charles, is there someone before that? I'm sorry, because I don't see everyone. I'm sorry.
No, Lisa Rogers' hands up.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not Lisa, I'm Dave. And the question, it's not the charter revision. I'm back to the zoning. And but I do appreciate the conversation about the charter revision and Alex's perspectives. On the zoning regs, all the noise related to the single to two family modifications has kind of sucked all the oxygen out of the room. And I'm wondering what other aspects of the zoning changes should we be paying attention to? What else? I have not read the 60 pages of public comment.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what other things are out there that people are concerned about that you might be aware of.
Yeah. Thanks. That's an excellent question. And you're right. I think because so much of the focus immediately shifted to the maps and those changes for housing. So there's two other things really I would say, and anyone else can chime in on this as well. In addition to what we've been calling the upzoning, where you now can have two family housing and single family. And again, you don't have to do two family. It just means that you're allowed to do it. There are also zone changes where you have existing two family that can now go to mixed use development. And that's going to change some of the scope within neighborhoods of what types of uses would now be allowed in a neighborhood that may not have been allowed there before. So that's one thing that what people want to be watching for. When you go into the zoning documents and you click on the actual zoning regulations, you can scroll down through each of the new zones and see everything that's being regulated with that zone. The most important thing to look at are two things. You're going to see a use table, for lack of a better term. So let's say you're looking at CD-3 zone. When you open up that document, you're going to see down the left-hand side every possible use of a parcel, from housing to places of worship, to daycare centers, to brew pubs, medical offices, everything you can imagine, pages and pages of them, down the left-hand side. And they're kind of categorized by logical groups. Across the top of those pages is where how these things are designated for each zone. And so you'll see codes like P, S, NP, etc. As you go across each zone, the first one you'll want to look at is your own zone. So for example, you might be looking at something, bed and breakfast has just come up recently as a hot topic. So you may scroll down and see a use called bed and breakfast. When you scroll across the top, you'll see in every zone whether it's allowed, meaning it's permitted, and that means there's no special permit required, whether it's allowed, but with certain provisions. And there's an addendum that will tell you which certain provisions need to be taken into account, whether it's allowed by special permit, and whether it's not allowed at all. And I think a lot of folks aren't actually paying attention to all those uses, and they really need to. And it's hard even for us to go through all the zones and in East Norwalk and try to pick out some of the ones that weren't allowed before, but that are going to be allowed now. We asked Steve Kleppen to do a little spreadsheet for us to highlight that. And he did give it a good go, but it's actually kind of difficult to read. We did post it in ENNA, and we can post it again so that you can see it. The second thing, David, that people really need to pay attention to is the actual zoning regulations. And that talks about things like how high a building can be, what the setbacks can be on a property. It even goes into building materials, how windows are placed, how wide a driveway can be, where the driveway can be, all types of things about the actual structures and regulations about what can go onto a parcel. I think that that's something that because people have been kind of deflected away from all of that over to the actual zoning changes, that they're not paying a lot of attention to it. And it is something that you do need to sink your teeth into for your own parcel, and look that up to see what would be changing, especially heights and setbacks. And especially setbacks for if something is changing to 2-family zoning, you'll really want to pay attention to whether or not it's a 20-foot setback from the property line, or if it's a 10-foot setback, which would make a dramatic difference in a neighborhood. Another thing that's changing is how the city, and this is really convoluted, and I was absent for math this day, I can tell you for sure. The way that they're now taking a look at building heights is completely changed. Before, there was a defined definition of, say, 2.5 stories. So you know exactly what a 2.5-story building would look like from the street, because they defined what each level of the building can be and what the pitch of the roof can be, etc. And also where they measure the baseline of the height. In the new regulations, that basically goes away, in addition to accommodating parcels that are on a slope. So if you had a very sloped property, and I'll go ahead and use Mill Pond as this example, because our property slopes way down, they no longer have to take into account what would be the height of the building looking from the rear. They can take into account using that as the height, but then what it would be viewed as from the street. And in fact, within the regulations, I believe they even use that sentence, that the perception of height and the size of a parcel is what the perception is looking at it from the street. So that's another fairly major change in what's going on. I did see in this list of comments, I started reading through those 62 pages, believe it or not, where someone who, he either said he was an architect, or he's obviously an architect, or she, pointed out that under these new regulations, a 2.5 building story could suddenly be anywhere from 4 to 6 feet taller than what it would have been under the old regulations. And that's a pretty significant difference when you're talking about, we're already talking about 3.5 stories and the 40 feet on East Avenue. So anything that's impacting 4 to 6 feet when you're looking at just 2.5 stories could make a big difference. David, I would love to be able to tell you that ENNA is in a position to do the analysis of all of those things, but it would be, I don't know how many people it would take and how long it would take to do it. It is one of those things that we've been encouraging people, other than hearing just from I'll say the usual suspects, for lack of a better term, but I'll say that with all respect, that regular folks need to be writing in and saying, can you explain to me exactly what is changing here? And start to question some of those regulations. I don't know if it's come out yet, or if it was because it was an error, but we even found a zone. I'm not sure if it's here or not, but we found a zone when you dig into the teeth of the regulation, they would no longer allow vinyl siding. And I tend to doubt that any homeowner who maybe either has it or would be looking to have it would be sinking their teeth into regulations as to whether they could do vinyl siding. And other people way more intelligent on this stuff than I am have started asking very serious questions now about, if these changes get approved and they are effective January 1st of 2024. Do all of the parcels that have any difference in the zoning regulations, either the use or the building regulations and property regulations themselves, do they become automatically non-conforming? And I don't know who else is on this call that can speak to non-conforming. It could even be Alex again, although we're not, I'm not putting you on the spot there, but having a legal non-conforming property still poses some sort of an impact on the property owner. And so with setbacks and building materials and placements of windows and driveway placements and everything like that, could there be tens of thousands, literally, parcels that now automatically overnight on January 2nd have become legally non-conforming? Any realtors in the group tonight? I see some phone numbers that I don't know, but okay, maybe not.
So one area that I think I mentioned something in the last public hearing had to do with the light industrial zone and the permitted activities in the light industrial zones. Mm-hmm. And of course, the whole excitement surrounding the Norden site was what was on my mind, but there are light industrials all over the city and in little pockets throughout East Norwalk and South Norwalk, mm-hmm. just owing to the industrial history of the city over the past 150 years. So like I'm thinking of, the one that did pop out was the warehousing and distribution as available by right, mm-hmm. for any light industrial parcel. Mm-hmm. So there's like a little corner down on Fort Point Street that could become a warehouse. There's the Dooney and Bourke facility. There's Norden's. There's plenty of other places in town. And at a minimum, I have to just get around to writing the public comment because I haven't done it yet, is that they should be considered special permit and not by right, because that will, if that goes into effect January 2nd, we're going to have trucks on Triangle Street again.
Exactly. And in fact, we've on multiple occasions, ENNA has made the ask on the behalf of residents that within that industrial 2 zone, which they're all classified as now, we provided a list to Steve Kleppen and the commission of ones that we think are so objectionable that they shouldn't even be considered by special permit, and that they need to come out altogether. And I think some of them finally did drop out, like petroleum processing plants and the propane storage. I know what's still in there, I think, is transportation vehicle terminals. So we could have like a massive regional bus terminal there. I think utility storage facilities, which means that, Eversource or whoever could come in and have a big parcel and be storing their equipment and going in and out. So that list in industrial is still up in the air. Some things came out and others are still in there. And just for the benefit of the folks who to understand how we do this when we're looking at the objectionable uses, for example, adult uses as well. Adult establishments, I think they call them, rock crushing plants. In some cases, the waterfront looks like it could be, I haven't actually asked this one yet of Steve, but it looks like our waterfront could be overrun with hotels. And I didn't see any height restrictions on those. But my point is that, and you guys heard me say this before, but once a resident or a community, as a group, objects to a use, ENNA has never felt that the real burden of getting rid of that use falls to the resident. You shouldn't have to try to do research and make compelling arguments and hire consultants to say, this is why we don't want this objectionable use. Once you or we object, we feel that the onus then goes back on city staff for them to justify why it should be in. And quite honestly, in the absence of a statutory reason why it might be in, I don't want to get into halfway houses or anything because that's a big legal bailiwick there. But in some cases, there are statutory requirements from the state that tell us what we must allow in a zone. But let's say it's none of those. If it's something that we strictly object to, then the onus should be on staff and the commission then to come back with some very compelling reasons of why they want it in there. So far, the ones that we've objected to, going back to the time we started asking, we started objecting to uses with Norton and asking, we've asked repeatedly, by the way, for special permit moratoriums over here. That's going to be a legal battle down the road, but I don't want to get into that. In some cases, because planning and zoning reports into economic and community and neighborhood development, they were trying to say that some of these otherwise objectionable industrial uses are there for the benefit of either tax revenues or job creation. And for those of you who are hanging around through the whole painful Norton adventure, you will see that we made, we didn't have to, but we made the compelling case that actually none of those create, well-paying jobs or a lot of jobs. And most of them don't really create tax revenue because the materials that they store in a distribution center that are for resale aren't taxable. They basically have a couple of computers. They may have to pay for a couple of forklifts, if that. And because most of it is automated, they don't even, hire a lot of high-paying jobs. The same thing if we had a municipal utility storage area, none of that would be taxable. And the nature of municipalities now is that they run kind of on, don't need a whole lot of head count. And if we were to end up with something like a regional bus terminal, certainly that would be a large parcel and there wouldn't be really any jobs associated with that because the jobs are associated with people who are driving the buses and that already exists. So I hope that makes sense. And again, the point is, if there's something that you feel strongly about, then you can also ask staff why it is that they feel compelled and want to have it in our community. And if you don't think it's already on an ENNA list, then email it into us as well. And we'll get it off of there. They have, I just saw in the questions and answers too, now they are starting to make a further clarification now on where they had in that you could have bed and breakfasts as of right in a single family zone. So that's being re-examined now, and presumably they'll change it to a special permit. But I'm not even sure if that goes far enough. I need to think a little bit more about what a bed and breakfast operation in a single family zone would do to, quality of life and cars and all that good stuff. I never know if I'm actually answering the questions now or just rattling. So David, hopefully I answered your question. Chumley, I can't look at stuff and read chat at the same time, and my brain doesn't work that way. Is there anything in chat before I know you have to leave us?
Actually, there is not, unless you want to talk about the Water's Edge.
Okay, Water's Edge. Thank you, Deborah, for that. This is super important. Hi, Deborah. So this is really kind of convoluted because there's a number of studies going on at the same time. So it seems like it's all piecemeal instead of really having like just, a zoning regulation rewrite study that incorporates what they're looking to accomplish in the master plan. So in addition to this going on, as you know, there was the industrial zone study and the waterfront study, which were broken out separately. I believe just last week, the Common Council, I believe, and I'll look this up, but I believe they approved the waterfront study and the recommendations in there. But what I don't know, Deborah, is the correlation between what the final recommendations were in waterfront study and how they relate to the zoning regulation update. Because I think some of it they changed at the last minute, mostly related to Water Street and how development could happen there. But if you unmute and you want to, you may have more insight than I do right now. And it is both, I want to make clear too, in the beginning, I think a lot of people were not really focusing on that because they thought it was strictly a upriver and South Norwalk issue. But it is on our side of the river, for lack of a better term, in terms of even where the wastewater treatment plant is and the Public Works Center, but also, you know, along the waterfront and the commercial marina as well. So all waterfront going all the way down to the beach.
They have talked about the water's edge around Veterans Park and how it's eroded now, and they were going to bring that back a little and then backfill to raise the park again. But I think the thing we were also worried about was with the new zoning regulation, they created another new description for that area, like along Seaview Avenue on the park side, which they never answered our question to about what, you know, what are their plans for that? What does that new zoning mean? Are they planning to build structures there? That's my big concern with what's going on with that. The water's edge thing seems like they're doing the right thing right now. It's just what comes after. What is their other plan in that new zoning regulation with that new term or whatever they're calling it? Yeah.
And that water's edge is also now a separate study that got a grant through the Maritime Aquarium,
right,
to work with the Norwalk River Watershed Association as well. And we have a former board member who is repping that for ENNA. So they're looking to do natural buffering there, then would make the park more useful in terms of, you know, flooding and all that tidal stuff that goes on. So then when you hit Seaview, though, the question is, you know, they building, first of all, it's not the city building, it's them putting in, you know, zoning that would allow for expanded, not only buildings, but uses. I do know the folks in Seaview are starting to organize around taking a look at what that would mean in their neighborhood, because where they have two family now, by the way, it's two family, they are, unless anything changed today, they are still slated to be two family mixed use. Right. And so that could be a lot of commercial in that area. We do know from several years ago, during the TOD study, Director Kleppen was very big on looking to do what was called the Seaview Avenue Promenade, to expand, you know, multiple, you know, multi-season uses there. But it didn't really, at that time, it didn't really look to what could potentially be the uses in the residential neighborhood that's within Seaview. You know, it's really only talking about Seaview Avenue, and even the Seaview Avenue project, Deborah, if you haven't seen it.
We attended one of those meetings and did the walk down the street. So we know what their intentions are, and it doesn't seem intrusive. And it seems to keep the park as it is, just adding, you know, crossways so people can cross the street and access the park, the public, you know. My only concern is if they think that they're going to put buildings up along that side of the street, you know. Years ago, all the deeds and the houses along Seaview Avenue, when the owners donated the property to the city, there was a stipulation that they could not build buildings on the park to block the view. Now with this new zoning, I'm wondering, because every time we ask, we don't get an answer. You know, I'm concerned about what they think they are planning for the future there.
I don't think that they're planning for buildings there, but they're definitely planning for expanding all the parking along there as well.
Yeah.
And then I think the
Yes.
buildings that then, could go on the other side would be higher. I know Charles has to jump off, but he knows a little bit more about, are you able to?
Actually, they rezoned it as the civic zone. And if you look at
Okay.
some of the uses for that, there's a lot of standard park things that we don't object to. But there's also an amphitheater, performing arts, a restaurant, all of this is permitted. So
Yeah, that's my problem. Yeah.
yeah, so you could see a restaurant selling alcohol in the park. You can see big, loud concerts and gatherings. So that's being so close to residential, that's what I object to. There's nothing wrong with the sports in there now. We deal with the Oyster Festival, a gathering place for parades and public ceremonies. We have no issue with that. But if it's going to become a summer haven for concerts and drinking and whatever, I don't think it's the right place for that. It's disrespectful for what the park means. It's a memorial park and it should be respected.
I did have a
they've
quick.
abandoned the original.
Yeah.
Back in 2012, they had a whole master plan that seemed, very respectful of the potential uses. There were some things in there we weren't happy with, but for the most part, it was respectful. And I know a part of it did say then they want to bring in more monuments and really make it more of the, Veterans Memorial Park. But then they basically ended up abandoning it, Deborah, and then they did a whole parks master plan, put that one on the shelf, and now there's all new things in the new plan. In addition to what Charles just said too, they're also looking to have late night parking there that's open to support the local businesses. And that would be a quality of life issue for the residents at Seaview for sure.
That was brought up on the walk that we were doing, was a big objection with everyone that was attending that walk, and saying, I remember fighting to get the park closed by a certain time because of what was going on there when it was open all night long. So that was an objection which we made known right off the bat to them about the parking down there. Will it be regulated? And will it be closed at a specific time, because the restaurants are closed. So.
No, exactly. Yeah. And if they're open late, I mean, we're not using public facilities like Veterans Memorial Park to support private businesses in terms of their inadequacy of on-site parking. It just exacerbates the whole debate over parking. I'm concerned too. I think when you first started speaking, you said that you're really not getting the answers to these questions. If you're writing into city staff like to Steve Kleppen, or you're posting.
Well, we asked him at one of the meetings. We asked him point blank at one of the meetings, and he said, "I'll get back to you," and he never did. Okay. So,
would you be willing to send him an email?
I will. Yeah, I will send him an email.
Yeah, and maybe even just open up to just say, like, I never, I know you're busy, but I never heard back from you from these questions, and we need to get them answered, as we're considering the full zoning rewrite now.
Right.
Thanks.
I also met with the parks director because they had a open meeting about their new plans for the parks around the town and everything. And when I spoke to him about the plans for Veterans Park, he was saying, that's on their 10-year plan list, not their short-term plan list. But he said to me that the amphitheater thing was not gonna happen there. It's not a good location for it. Yeah. He verbally said that. So that doesn't mean anything, but yeah.
And that may be another opportunity to write, to just say, just to confirm what we spoke about early on. That amphitheater has been coming in and out of the plans for as long as I've been hanging around here. They are very well aware of the specific deed restrictions, though. And I think they know that there's no way around that. It's not even like a generational thing where people can, then agree to rescind it. It's just not going to happen. So, okay. At least there hasn't been any pushback on that. They're well aware of it.
Well, what the parks director said to me is, he goes, "Yeah, well, what about that building in the middle of the park?" Which, as you know, went in like under the slide. There was never any information on that, all of a sudden it appeared in the middle
Right.
of the park.
Right.
So, as far as I said, it should be torn down. That's
Yeah.
my feeling. I
Right.
mean, you don't open the bathrooms, but guess what? They're opening the bathrooms now because of public complaint.
Right.
But, and other than that, it's just being used by Public Works to store things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Nope. I hear you. I hear you.
All right. I'm taking up too much time with that one little corner.
No,
of
it's important.
East
It's
North, but,
important. Because
yeah.
it takes into account the whole waterfront, and I think people also may not be aware of the full impact of the walk bridge on our community as a whole. In addition to the walk bridge session coming up that they're holding on the Strawberry Avenue Metro North Bridge, I'm going to ask them to come back in and give an overview on all the walk bridge projects and how it's impacting East Norwalk. Because the last I checked, the final approvals went through for them to be able to run the Eversource lines through Veterans Memorial Park. And I think the decision is already made, like where that would come across from Water Street and go into the park. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I see Mr. Pinto on my screen. So if you want to chime in, fine. If not, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Diana. Yeah, we have a major problem with that. We are responding to Eversource's proposal. As a matter of fact, I have it.
When you say we, John, can you just identify your mission?
I'm sorry. John Pinto, I'm the chairman of the Application Review Committee at North Carbon Management Commission.
Okay.
I completed our response to Eversource's proposal to reposition the 215 kilovolt power lines under the visitor stock. I personally have a major issue with that, but the city and their divine wisdom, whoever okayed this, because this has never been, we've talked to many experts in the area where a power line of this magnitude has gone underneath a public facility. And so we are probably first in the country to have this positioned underneath the public facility. The issue that I have is that it's going to limit the city's ability to do any kind of renovation in the future.
Right.
They just admitted at the last Harbor Management Commission meeting that we had with Eversource that there's an exclusion zone that will be imparted on this positioning of the 215 kilovolt cables going under. Now they're going underneath the last of the pilings by about 13 feet. This is they're going to be probably about 45 feet below the harbor level, the sea level, the harbor level. But the fact is that these pilings go down deeper. They will go about 13 feet below the pilings, but nonetheless, they're going underneath the visitor's dock. And there's going to be a swath of area that is going to be considered an exclusion zone, probably about, I'm guessing, according to national regulations, 8 meters on either side, but it's a 3-dimensional thing. So it's 8 meters on either side of where those dimension lines are going, but it's also going to be 8 meters above also with regard to any operation, anything that is going to be, if you're going to build or do anything, any renovation or requirement of renovating those docks in the future, that Eversource will have full command over what you can put there. So what we are asking for, and this is going to be submitted to Eversource in a day or so, because as I said, I already have the letter made up, is that any renovation that is over and above, let's, for example, we plan to renovate those docks, let's say in 25 years from now.
Right.
And we're going to be limited in the scope, and plus limited as far as the construction. There's going to be special construction requirement and construction requirements that are going to be placed on developing in that area, that Eversource will pay that difference. In other words, assume that we wanted to make plans to change the dock, let's say in 25 years, without those transmission lines there. But now, in the presence of those transmission lines, there's going to be special requirements. You need a special type of construction material, special type of individuals that have to work around that. We want Eversource to compensate the city for anything that we would have to incur for replacement of those docks over and above that would require replacement if those docks of those transmission lines were not there. I'm not making myself plain on that. But that's the only thing that we can do right now, because the city in their divine wisdom, somebody, whether it was DPW or whether it was I don't know exactly who, but they okayed this. The original plan was to go between pilings. Then we saw 4 iterations of this plan. The first direction was going between the pilings. I said, you can't be doing that. You can't do that, because we had a problem where those pilings were washed away during Sandy.
Right.
That would have sent well, I want to tell you the devastation that would have happened if that. Then they decided that they were going to put those transmission lines to the north of the visitors dock, that would go between the visitors docks and the Straffolino Bridge, and again tunneling there and coming up on the parking lot side. Then they lost the property that was at 68 Water Street, and they gained the property that is 98 Water Street, because the new owners, I guess that was DiNardo, wanted to build there, and he wanted to capture that area, so they could not use that area. So they're now going at the I think it's is it 90 78 Water Street, what's the parcel of land next to that. And so the angle of going under was changed. So they now had to go from the north of the dock. Now they're going back well underneath the dock, underneath the harbor. That's their final plan that's been agreed to by the siting council. And we put a petition to argue our disconcern with that, but the siting council and divine wisdom said it's okay that they can go underneath the visitors dock in that manner. We had an expert who's done work in this area. They've done tunneling, horizontal directional drilling under Hudson River, under the Mississippi River. And he said this is the first time that he's ever seen a transmission line of this magnitude underneath a public facility. What I'm afraid of is that we're going to have this huge signage on the visitors dock, beware of high voltage tension.
Right.
And, anybody's, there's going to be a little bit of hesitation, let me put it that way, of perhaps being around that area. My concern is and the recommendation, that original recommendation by this expert, is they could have gone well south of the visitors dock and come up and follow the roadway that goes around Veterans Park and come up again on the other side. There has been no problem with that. But nonetheless, it is what it is. And this is what we have to deal with. So right now, the plans is that the transmission lines will come underneath Elizabeth Street from the police headquarters, underneath Water Street. And then it's going to be horizontal directional drilling, tunneling down underneath the harbor.
Wow.
And then come up behind in the parking lot behind the Donovan Visitors Dock Boating Center, and then having a vault of a spice box, and then continuing drilling along the Van Zandt Street, not Van Zandt, along the roadway. Oh, and meeting up again on Smith Street area, and meeting up with the high tension wires there again. So
John, just thank you for that, and thank you for all the good work you do too, looking out for our property and the harbor and the park. And
I wish the city would have done that too. I'm sorry that did not do that. Somebody dropped the ball on this one.
I hear you.
And I'll go first out right and say that somewhere along the line, it was very poorly designed, very poorly done. And I don't know who'd had that.
And I think there's some too, I won't get into the debate here, but the way that the property owners on Water Street weren't cooperative, I think, created a bunch of this mess in the first place. And if the state had exercised eminent domain, in either of those cases, they've definitely abused it, I feel, in the past, but these would have been legitimate cases to say, this is where we have to go with these lines, especially to protect the harbor and the.
Certainly, I have no objection. I have no objection, Dan, of the tension wires going under the harbor. There's no problem. No problem with that going under the harbor, but it's in the location. It's in a public facility, a public dock where pedestrians are going to be walking and hopefully enjoying the harbor. That's our only input for boating into Norfolk Harbor. The other thing is the Water Street area too. It's troubling, very troubling to me that they want to put housing in a flood zone, especially in a marine commercial zone. And the disappointing thing is that what I have with this resiliency program and also the rezoning is that not one word was mentioned about the Coastal Management Act that,
Right.
that deals with the placement of public housing in a restricted area such as what we have there.
Mhm.
But the answer to that is to elevate the streets 3 feet, 4 feet,
Right.
and public dollars have got to go into doing that for developers that want to put buildings in that area.
Right.
You know, so anyway, there's a big problem with that too.
Yeah. I think that's a larger topic, but I think a lot of people
a
share that
larger topic,
concern
yeah.
for sure.
But for some reason, and I don't know what to say. I don't know if the Planning and Zoning Commission are transplants, but as far as I'm concerned, the ambience of Norwalk is being completely changed by people who perhaps do not know the history of Norwalk.
Mhm.
If you look at the history of Norwalk, the DEP was in the process of suing the city for redeveloping that Water Street area.
Mhm.
And so I don't know what happened after that, but nonetheless, the DEP, I don't think will contest the placement of housing facilities in that flood zone. I'm
Right.
not sure about that. I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to knuckle under and allow
Yeah.
the city to do what they want to do. And
Yeah.
again, they've used this under the guise of a resiliency plan. A resiliency plan is not to increase
Right.
the housing in the area, but it's what are you going to do to mitigate the
Right.
possibility of flooding?
Exactly.
And
Exactly. Yeah.
so
Thanks, John.
anyway, okay. I'm sorry to take too much time
Yeah.
on that.
No. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or anything about process, about how to be providing your feedback, who you can ask questions to, what the next steps are with some of these major projects that we see going through? Okay. I lost my co-pilot here, so I'm trying to, let me just read through the chats quick and see. Yeah, and I think, yeah, the question on deeding the property to the city is in there about not making money from enterprises. That's true. And, you know, part of the restriction is wherever there are deed restrictions like that, they generally contain wording that there can't be commercial ventures. And so in the terms of Veterans Memorial Park, I think the big one that some people may remember is the original application to put a big mini golf in there. And that's what actually brought up the point of the deed restrictions, amongst other things, I think duck boat operations, et cetera. And then someone asked a question about the master plan for the updated sewer plant. So that's interesting. As you know, with all this development going on, folks may know that the city contends that the capacity already exists and that with new development, because of new technology, with water conservation and the way sewage is handled, that it's not going to have that big of an impact. But most of us deal more kind of in common sense. And obviously, if the sewer plant can't handle rainstorms and has an issue with the capacity now, you know, we don't see that getting any better. And of course, we agree with the logic that says there's less of an impact if you're looking at a single structure than you're looking at, you know, private homes that have massive lawns and swimming pools and things. So on a foot per foot basis, apartments can have a reduced impact in terms of water usage and water runoff. But the fact of the matter is, it's not like we're building more land with lawns and putting up houses and pools all over the place. That's just not happening in Norwalk. What is happening is the stuff that's been approved by the city that are larger apartment complex. And now with what we call infill development and middle housing, which, by the way, is something ENNA has supported all along, then we're going to see more and more strain on city services, not just sewer and utilities like water, but also on our school system, our emergency services system, and on infrastructure as well. I want to make a comment too, because we do video these, and there's been a lot of misinformation coming from the city side. The premise under which the ENNA organization itself took a position to support middle housing and infill housing was to give people more of an opportunity in housing choices that they would be able to own. For example, duplexes and quadplexes and bungalows and courtyard developments, the types of things that you see in communities where the neighborhood and the community are the primary consideration and not just packing people in. We did not support it as something as a global zoning change in our neighborhoods where people could do all of these things as of right, meaning without a special permit. There was the assumption that it would be specific portions of neighborhoods where it really made sense, but that it would always have been by special permit. So what you saw get presented where there's these sweeping draconian changes to go from one family to allow single is not what ENNA had in mind. And I just want to make sure people are clear on that. So we will watch your emails. If for some reason you're on this call and you're not on our email list, you need to do that because that's how we get communication out. And also we'll be meeting on August 21st. If we find that we need to have some additional meetings related to all these zoning regulations, we will post them in our email and hopefully as many people can participate as possible. But please, please, please get your questions, comments, concerns, and suggestions into zoning as soon as you can. As soon as this week, I believe the zoning commission, planning and zoning commission continues their deliberation. And then there'll be at least another 2 meetings in August. So we want to make sure that all of the stuff that you want to see them seeing and talking about and answering are on their agenda. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Thanks, John. Again, appreciate that. Really helpful. Good night, everyone.